Hey everyone! So in today's video, we're going to be talking about things that I wish I knew before I started purchasing vehicles, because I could have saved myself a ton of money. We're talking like tens of thousands of dollars if I had known these things. But before we get into this video, as always, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. And then if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. Let's get into it. So the first thing that I wish I knew was that used isn't always the route to go. So what you constantly hear people say is that you should only buy used vehicles. New vehicles are overpriced and they're going to depreciate the most and you just shouldn't touch them. And I have learned that this is sometimes true, but there's a lot of cases where it's not true. So when I was a teenager, I would only buy used vehicles because frankly, that's all I could afford. But also that's what I had heard is that you never want to buy new, right? So I would just buy these used vehicles. And what I kept running into is tons of reliability issues because, well, when you buy a used vehicle, well, it's called used for a reason. It's been used. And so I kept running into mechanical issues with the vehicles that I initially owned, and they ended up costing me so much money. Like the car that I traded in for my first new vehicle was costing me literally several $100s per month. I had a car payment in maintenance costs. And so I think this is something that people should definitely consider when they're buying used, is like, how used is the vehicle? And obviously you can sometimes get great deals on vehicles that are just lightly used, but you know, whenever you think of used car, you usually think of something that has quite a few miles. So you can get a big enough discount because of depreciation based on the miles, and it's just not always the best route to go. So I wish that that's something that I knew going into it, so that I, didn't end up with cars that basically gave me a car payment in the form of maintenance costs. Now, the second thing that I wish that I had known was that cash is not always king. So the first couple of vehicles that I purchased, I paid for in cash because, well, they were cheap clunkers and that's all I could afford to pay for in cash, because that's what I thought that you had to do with a vehicle. You shouldn't take out a loan because, well, then you're paying interest on a depreciating asset, and that's just plain old stupid. But again, I was buying vehicles that were complete turds because that's all that fit in my budget, and I was ending up spending so much money on those vehicles that if I had instead spent that same amount of money on a brand new car payment, I would be in a similar situation financially, but I would have a brand new car that's not constantly breaking down, which was preventing me from hanging out with friends when I wanted to. I literally had to, miss work a few times, which was absolutely devastating because, well, I had those big maintenance payments. And so it was just not a great situation overall. Like the opportunity cost with that was absolutely horrible. And so cash is not always king, especially when you're at the lower price spectrum with cars to where all you can buy is unreliable. And so what I'd have to say is I would take a low payment on a relatively new car every single time over buying a crappy, cheap, inexpensive car that I can pay for in full. Like obviously if you can find a reliable car where you can pay for it with cash, then yeah, that's the route to go. But if you can't find that, something that's a little bit newer and nicer, that's more reliable, I think is best, because then you can get to work, right? And then you can actually make money and, pay off that car, right? Now, the third thing that I wish that I knew was to not take out loans that are longer than necessary. And so what I did when I worked in the sales job at the dealership is I would always take out the longest possible loan with the lowest possible interest rate. And so when I was working at the dealership, there was typically deals for like 2.99% at 72 months at that time, which sounds crazy in today's market where everything's like 5-6%. But anyways, that's what I did, is I'd always do like 72-month loans. But based off of what I was making, I should have realistically been taking a loan of like maybe 36 to 48 months, which ultimately would have led to me paying a lot less in interest and having a slightly lower interest rate, especially at like the 36-month loan term with what was happening there. But I didn't do that because I said, oh, well, it's a sales job, and so maybe, the money won't be coming in tomorrow, and so I want to have the car payment as low as possible so that I can always afford it. But I think that overall that was just like the wrong mentality. I should have gone in with a mentality of, if I am not sure that I can afford this payment with this loan term that makes the most sense, then I probably should wait to buy the car. And so what I'd have to say is always go for the shortest possible loan term that fits within your budget. Don't extend it out because you want to quote unquote play it safe, because playing it safe ultimately leads to you paying more in interest. And yes, you can technically pay off loans early, but are you really going to? Now, the fourth thing that I wish I knew was to not purchase vehicles that I liked, but to purchase vehicles that not only I liked, but the market liked. And what I mean is there were a couple of vehicles that I purchased early in my vehicle buying career that were absolute mistakes, because although I thought they were really cool, the car market didn't necessarily agree with me, and I lost a ton of money on them. The two vehicles were a Shelby GT350 and a Ram Rebel, which a lot of you might be like, those are two really cool vehicles. But here's the deal. At the time that I purchased them, well, the Shelby GT350 was actually depreciating at a pretty rapid rate because people weren't all excited about the car because there was a lot of reliability concerns with the powertrain that are still there, but people seem to kind of not worry about it as much. And then with the Ram Rebel, well, I thought it was a really cool, beefy off-road truck, but the market just said, it's a Ram 1500 with some off-road tires, get over it, kid. And so when I traded both those vehicles in total combined, I lost like $12,000. Extremely painful. And so that taught me to focus on buying vehicles that not only, again, I liked, but the market liked. And so that's why after that whole purchase, I purchased another Ram Rebel, which I know sounds like a mistake going from one Rebel to the next, but it was a 5th generation Ram, which was super hot. And so when I got rid of that one, well, I didn't lose any money. I broke even. And then after that, I bought a Ford Raptor, similar situation. And then, you know, the Ram TRX, and then now I have the Gen 3 Raptor. And there's so many other vehicles on the channel. And if you pay attention to the vehicles I buy on the channel, they're all vehicles that are in very high demand, that are hard to get. And I do that on purpose, not just because, you know, I'm trying to, you know, make money on the vehicles. It's because I don't want to lose money on the vehicles. And so that's something that I wish I knew a little bit sooner so that, well, I didn't have to lose that $12,000, because that was painful. Now, the fifth thing that I wish I had learned was that aftermarket warranties aren't all that good or necessarily worth it, especially for someone like me that purchases cars all the time. So when I started working at the dealership at 19 years old, obviously I didn't know like anything about the car business, and so I had to learn quite a bit. And one thing that I learned pretty fast was that if you're an employee at a dealership and you purchase a vehicle from that dealership, you pretty much have to buy a warranty. Now, the dealer won't mark up the warranty. They'd sell it to you at cost. And so you're actually getting a pretty good deal on the warranty. But what I found pretty quickly is that the warranty wouldn't help me out at all, because when I go in and take my vehicles in for warranty claims, well, the aftermarket warranty would pretty much never cover it. And then the manufacturer warranty would be the one that would sometimes cover it and sometimes not. And so I found myself in a situation where I was buying these warranties and I wasn't actually getting anything for them, because if something was going to get covered under warranty, it was going to be under the manufacturer warranty. Now, again, I was getting a great deal on these warranties, so I wasn't paying a whole lot for them. And the other thing about warranties on vehicles is they're prorated. So if you buy a warranty and then you sell the vehicle, well, you can go in and get not a full refund for the warranty, because again, it's prorated, but you can get some of your money back. And so it's not a situation that cost me a lot financially. I mean, probably like literally a few $100s over the course of several years, which is, I don't think that's bad. But, you know, after actually like using these, and this is something that I think is really good experience because it's something that I can now talk about on the channel. Most aftermarket warranties, frankly, they're not useless, but like chances are if you're not going to keep a vehicle for more than outside of the actual, you know, manufacturer warranty, there's no point in getting an aftermarket warranty, because anything that's going to get covered under that vehicle is going to be under the manufacturer warranty. The aftermarket company, it doesn't want to touch anything, and so you're basically paying money for nothing. Dealerships aren't going to want me to say that, but that's something that I have learned and that I wish that I knew sooner. And so moving forward with my vehicle purchases, unless I plan on keeping a vehicle for a long time, I'm not going to be purchasing aftermarket warranties. Like, for example, the two vehicles that I purchased in December, didn't purchase a warranty on either of those vehicles, and that was the first time that I've done that in a long time. And again, it's because I have learned from experience that there's no added benefit for me personally, and that's just because, well, I buy new vehicles every 6 months. It's pretty crazy. The sixth thing that I wish I had known before purchasing vehicles was that more options doesn't always equal better resale value on a vehicle or a better owner experience. And I'll use my Ram TRX as an example. I ordered that with every single option. It stickered for almost $95,000, which if I ordered the same truck in today's market, it would have over $100,000 MSRP, which is crazy. And here's the deal. A lot of the options, I never used them. It had a panoramic sunroof. I pretty much never used that. I ordered it with like the red stitching and the carbon fiber trim in the door panel. And although it was nice to look at, it didn't really add any sort of benefit for me. And then when it comes to resale value, well, if I'd ordered a base model TRX, I would have been able to sell it for not quite as much as what I sold my truck for, but the difference would have been only like a few $1,000s, because people buy Ram TRXs because it's a TRX, not because you ordered the carbon fiber trim and the red stitching and everything. And so what this has kind of led me to do is, instead of, trying to get vehicles with every single option, like is what I did in the past, because I thought that, it would make the YouTube videos better too, I've instead pulled back, and I'm more okay with having, quote unquote base model versions of cars, because that's actually frankly what I like more, because I don't use half the options in a car, and it'll ultimately lead to me having much better resale value with the vehicles compared to what I paid for the vehicle. Now, the seventh thing that I wish that I had known is that luxury or more expensive prices don't always equal better quality with a vehicle or just a better vehicle overall. And the thing that I'm really glad about with this point is that I didn't actually spend money to learn this. This came from reviewing a bunch of cars on the main channel. So what I found is that once you go over $100,000 in terms of vehicle price, which is already a ton of money, but anyways, once you go over that, vehicles get slightly better, but not that much. And so like, if you get a really nice fully loaded vehicle from a non-luxury manufacturer that's under $100,000, and then you go and compare it to, $150,000 Range Rover or something like that, for example, what you're going to find is, yeah, the Range Rover is going to drive slightly better. It might accelerate a little bit quicker, and the seats might feel a little bit more comfortable, but it's not going to be, twice as exciting, twice as comfortable, twice as fast. You guys get the point. And so that's something that I'm glad that I learned through reviews rather than spending money, because now that I've known this, like, I have literally no desire to own like super expensive luxury cars. Like with the vehicles that I have right now, I mean, you guys know, like I have the Jeep Wrangler Rubicon 392, I've got the Raptor, I've got two other vehicles that I can't talk about that are going to be here soon. I could obviously afford a more expensive vehicle, but after reviewing them, I have literally no desire. Like a lot of, and I'm not going to name any names, but a lot of these really expensive vehicles that I review, I leave those reviews really disappointed, because I'm like, this costs this much and this is how it drives and this is how it feels. I'm like, well, I guess people like the badge enough to pay for it. Now, the eighth thing that I wish that I had known sooner was that just because a vehicle is hyped up by other people or by journalists, or frankly the opposite, where it's hyped down, that doesn't necessarily mean that the vehicle is really good or really bad. A couple examples that I'll give is, first off, the new Ford F-150 Raptor. This was a vehicle that initially was talked down on by the entire Raptor community and by a lot of journalists, because they're like, oh, there's not enough changes. And then I, obviously went in and ordered one despite that, and then drove it and found that the new generation Raptor is so much better than the previous generation. Like, there's no chance between them. And so it's like, if I had gone with the hype, I wouldn't have bought the truck, and I would have completely regretted it. And then there are some other cars that have been hyped up a massive amount that I feel like just don't quite live up to expectations. An example that's, it's still a great car, but I don't feel like lives up to the hype is, the new Honda Civic Type R, and even, the previous generation Honda Civic Type R. You see the videos on the car and everyone says that it's like the best driving car on the planet, and it does drive exceptionally well. But it doesn't drive as well as the big market adjustments on the car. And again, frankly, as everyone says it's like, again, the best driving car on the planet pretty much is what it sounds like when you watch these reviews and what people will say about it. But then driving it myself, I'm like, this is really fun for a front wheel drive car, but it's still a 300 horsepower front wheel drive car. And so I just, I wish that I had known sooner that like the stuff that you see in the journalism world, and especially online and everything, it's not always reality with how these vehicles are. Now, the ninth thing that I wish that I had known sooner was that I don't have to stay local when it comes to car purchases. Now, when I first started buying vehicles, I thought that, well, that was the only route to go, is to just stay local, because, well, I would probably be able to get the best deal because they would, be businesses that would know me. And, on top of that, the travel costs and the shipping costs and everything, that would be too much for me to buy out of state. But obviously, after working as a salesman, I learned pretty quick that, well, there were a lot of people that were buying from us out of state because they could get a much better deal than where those people were at, despite, the costs with going out of state. And so that quickly changed my mentality on that. And that's why at this point, I have purchased actually 2 vehicles out of state. Now, that's not a massive amount compared to the amount of vehicles that I've purchased overall, but I would have never purchased those vehicles out of state had I not learned that while working at the dealership. And so what I'd have to say with this point is always be open to look outside of your market, because you might not always be able to find a better deal, but sometimes you definitely can. And then the 10th and final thing that I wish that I had known before I started purchasing cars was that, well, cars are just hunks of metal. This is something that I heard at the dealership time and time again by salespeople that had been there for decades. And I didn't really buy into it because, again, I'm a car person. I really like cars. But at the end of the day, cars are just hunks of metal that we drive around. And yes, they can have a lot of cool, fun stuff put into them. But no matter how much cool, fun stuff is put into them, at the end of the day, they're hunks of metal with wheels on them. And so if you can't buy the exact car that you want to buy, again, no big deal, right? Or if you happen to have a car that you really like that gets totaled, again, it's just a hunk of metal on wheels at the end of the day. And so, obviously as a car person, it's hard to not get emotionally attached to vehicles, but I think that, having at least some level of detachment from it, I think is important so that you don't make stupid impulse buys, and that if something happens to your vehicle, that it's not the end of the world. That's going to sum things up for today's video. And as always, if you want to see more stuff just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day.